Welcome to Everything Casual, bringing you original football casual videos from the golden era of the 80s and 90s, right up to current day. Football away day stories and historic clashes between football firms. Subscribe so you don't miss out. We upload videos every week.
I loved the Chelsea years. They had a firm renown throughout the country, a fighting army as big as Man U's, and a reputation to match. They played the numbers game, invading the opposition in hordes, always proud to wear the colours and confident their army was too big to have a go at. But when the real hard men got among the Stamford Bridge mob and put it about, they dismissed Chelsea as singers. Singers was how I best remember them, vociferously goading you about how great they were and how shit you were. They had the support and the numbers. Outside London, they were given enough respect, but the way we saw it, they were only good at smashing everything up. Football specials, Brighton seafront, you name it, they smashed it. The Chelsea singers grabbed front page, congratulations, you have just met the ICF. Headlines wherever they went, from the pink Saturday evening Northern papers to the Sunday papers. Them and Man U's Red Army were in the news all the time. We were pig sick of the way they grabbed all the headlines like they were the hardest lads in the land. As far as they were concerned, no firms would ever take the shed. And that included those miserable bastards, West Ham. Chelsea were the kings of hype. The Osgood years had gone to their heads. My first recollection of going to Chelsea to take the shed was in '73, when West Ham's famous black player Clyde Best banged in 2 goals to give us a 4-2 win. I went with the King twins and we met up with the Woolwich lot. Everyone was so much older than me and working in their first jobs. We were a collection of odds and sods, but made a fair turnout nevertheless. We were West Ham's representatives from south of the River Thames. There were lads from Dartford, Belvedere, Erith, Woolwich, Plumstead and Thamesmead. We were greeted warmly by a packed train full of the West Ham mob thundering to a stop at Embankment Tube Station. We piled on, pushing for a footing as everyone sang, "She wheels her wheelbarrow through the streets broad and narrow." This was West Ham's mob, singing, jostling, heaving and sweating, smiling urchin faces, grown men with beards and beer guts laughing with long-haired youths who didn't give a damn about school and hated work. We were a procession of Doc Martens. Everybody used to look lovingly down at their bother boots, admiring the polish, discussing the pros and cons of steel toe cappers. The nutters swore by them, but most lads didn't like the way they caused your boot to lose that classic look. As the train thundered nearer, you'd start pulling your laces tighter still. Everything had to feel right for when you stuck the boot in. Earl's Court and the doors open. What's going on? Everyone's getting off. You pile out too because everyone else has. But what about Fulham Broadway, your designated stop for Chelsea? Your head is twitching and searching over the bodies all around. The chant of mile end, rings out, echoing along the platform. You're charging up the platform towards the way out. Your mates are there 1 minute, split up in the crowd the next. It's a stampede, then a panic as gaps appear. Your own mob turns, pushing back through you. "Back on! Everyone back on!" yells Leperwardy, a popular, scruffy-looking West Ham character of the 70s. Everyone's piling back onto the tube, and you push through the carriage, smiling at being reunited with the mates you first set out with. Bodies crash into you. Everybody's getting squashed. Some accidentally slump over the ones sitting down, and you're all treading on feet. It's the old Bill. They're getting on. "Cass, you missed it all," pipes up one of the back yells. Chelsea had been all over the platform, and the first carriage piled out straight away, followed by the second. By the time all the others had got out, Chelsea had run back up through the exits. The old Bill have piled down, but not before we nick a few silk scarves off some of the Chelsea mob who'd stuffed. We all grabbed for the scarves, trying to nick them off each other. Trophies of war, your bedroom walls would be covered in them, and whenever you told the stories to your mates supporting other teams, you'd always pull the scarves out to emphasise how fresh the tale was, and that you were there in the annals of terrace history. Pile out at Fulham Broadway, leaving the transport police behind. It's up to the Met now. Everything goes quiet when you first come out of the station. Careful when choosing which ticket collectors to dodge through. Old Bill nicked one or two, clearing the way for the rest of us to pile through. Like sewer rats surfacing from underground, the sunlight hits you. You're out, and on their manor, but there's a ring of Chelsea Old Bill all round the entrance. Looking back, you glimpse the sight of police removing fans' bootlaces, and if they're lucky, a steel comb. They were popular back then. For these West Ham fans, the day is already over. They can only hope for some action after the game. You're walking alone to avoid attracting any unwanted attention, but with everyone in front and behind you all doing the same, we're still all together. Now we're behind Chelsea lines. We've passed all the Chelsea pubs, giving them the once over. No good. Nobody in them except Chelsea fans who don't want to know. The older fans know it rarely goes off in the street beforehand. Chelsea would be waiting in the shed for us, or in the courtyard entrance to the shed. The courtyard is like a big playground if they're up for it. They'll want to see us off there. There's also a small pub, almost opposite, that their boys would pile out from. But more often than not, their spotters would have warned them that they'd seen a good mob of us coming, maybe the same Chelsea guys we jumped out on back on the tube. It's the only way I can explain why they all go from milling around the courtyard to waiting for us in the shed. They won't be disappointed. Never mind all that bollocks about no one takes the shed. West Ham didn't just take the shed. We used it as our meeting place for years. So much so that whenever we get round to recalling the days when we took the shed, it's very hard to work out what season is actually being talked about. Most regard the best ever taking of the shed end by West Ham as the mounted horse year. We took the shed, got put out, then ran across the pitch to do it all again. It was Boxing Day 77 to 78 season, as Mouthy Bill recalls. We came in the other way to the shed near where the toilets were situated, opposite the main entrances into the Chelsea home end. As we looked up, all the Chelsea were waiting at the top of the stairs. We realised it was a bit early, so we shot into the toilets for about 10 minutes. When we'd come out, they'd gone, so we went up into the shed end. I bought a programme and decided to sit down and read it. Right by the stairs we'd come up, there were about 8 or 9 of us. As we were sitting or standing round, all of a sudden I was punched. I heard, "It ain't Christmas now," and they flew into me. They'd tumbled us and knew who we were. So we shot up the back, where we got pushed in against the fence. I remember Dickel and them were on the other side of this fence. They were leaning over, trying to bash the geezers coming into us. The old Bill came up to rescue the situation. They said, "Look, lads, you can go through there and sit in the seats. This is the Chelsea end, so it's advisable you don't remain." So I said, "No, we're going to hold on here, mate. It won't last like this for too long." Then we all heard this roar. We could see it, because the shed end was built in a sort of half circle, and you could look across and watch West Ham come over the top, fighting and bashing their way up the stairs. I watched Chelsea all run back. Then they appeared to turn and run across. Then you could see the whole shed run. Every part of the end was running. Now myself and the guys with me started bashing Chelsea supporters from the other side. We grabbed them and said, "What's happening?" They'd reply, "It's West Ham. They're coming in." Soon as they said that, bash, because they must be a Chelsea supporter. So we were steaming them, and we were getting right away through until we flew into a load of West Ham geezers. That was it. We'd all linked. We had taken their shed. It was bedlam as the old Bill got involved and Chelsea tried to regroup. The old Bill weren't taking prisoners, and West Ham got pushed all out onto the pitch. As we were pushed out onto the pitch, do you remember them big, long advertising boards they would have behind the goal? Well, this particular board was propped up by a chair. A load of geezers jumped out from behind it and came onto the pitch going, "Come on, we're Millwall." So I picked the chair up. The board was gone, and bash! I hit a geezer with the chair, then threw it. A copper on a horse had seen me and started chasing me. He grabbed me by the hair, but I managed to dive in and out through the goal and get away by mixing in with all the other West Ham supporters, going across the pitch to the other end as a line of mounted police sealed off the shed behind us with a row of horses. When we got to the other end and stood in the north stand, we watched another sizable West Ham mob kick it off in the shed end. That was it. Everyone in our end was trying to get on the pitch again. Many did, and started running back across the pitch, only to be thwarted by a line of police horses advancing to the halfway line. As for the other lot of West Ham running amok in the shed, the old Bill could only get them out by running them onto the pitch. That day was something. We had pure mob superiority on the biggest bother boy army in London. Woolwich also remembers the occasion as the best ever taking of the shed. He describes that attack on the shed through the main entrance. Chelsea had just come back up. The season before they'd been playing all stupid teams. I remember them going to places like Norwich and doing all sorts of silly things, like smashing a few trains up. That year was my last year at school, and the Chelsea lads I knew would go on and on about how hard their firm was. When we finally got Chelsea away, I told them, "Look, we're going to walk in your shed." They just didn't stop giving it to me that we wouldn't get in the shed. We met in a pub called the Palmerston on the corner of the King's Road. Obviously there were no colours among us, and we came out together in a mob of 200. When you think about it, who goes to their own home game in a mob of 200? It just don't happen. Well, we all came walking down the road, and someone had the sense to have a Chelsea scarf on and bowl along up front with us all singing "Chelsea" outside the shed. Nowadays, the old Bill would be straight onto you, but in those days, the old Bill didn't seem to care. You paid at the turnstiles and entered the shed by these really steep stairs. Although I wasn't right at the front, I was part of the first group through. We were walking up the stairs as everyone was coming in. We all got to the top of the stairs, where we all mingled about. It was obvious they knew who we were, and they all came around us. I remember a geezer going, "You ain't Chelsea." Someone said, "Fucking right we ain't, mug." Bang. It all went off. Someone hit that geezer, and we ran into the middle of the shed. As we did, all the other West Ham plotted up in there, already stopped making out they were Joe Public reading their programmes. They turned round and came in with us. Everyone steaming the shed together. We took the middle of the shed, with Chelsea pushed either side of us, at the front and behind. Then the old Bill tried to get us out. We were at the barrier with most of the West Ham forced back out on the pitch. Chelsea tried to hit the few of us left in the shed from behind. The West Ham guys down the front saw this, turned around and came running back up again, with those on the pitch jumping back in too, with all these idiots saying, "We're going to do you." It was absolutely superb to take the shed. I have respect for certain teams, but not them. I've never really rated Chelsea because every time we came up against them, they'd have it away as far as I was concerned. Although this was the season the ICF started, we weren't as organised as we were to become later. In those days it was all about waiting for the right faces to come along and follow on. But when it came to Chelsea's shed, we all used it as a West Ham meeting point. Jimmy Smith's account of the first real group of West Ham in that end, and events after the game, reinforces the buzz we felt at taking the shed that time. It's pure classic. Two firms, two reputations, one of which ends up in tatters. I was at Mile End from 10 in the morning. There were hundreds of West Ham arriving. Left about 11:30, train completely full. Half the train got off at Sloane Square while the rest of the mob stayed on to Earl's Court, then Stamford Bridge. Met Nat up there and we had a few skirmishes because some muppet pointed us all out. About 1 o'clock, a mob of 50 of us got in the shed, in no organisation whatsoever, unlike the Chelsea, who were all in there well early. By 1:45, the Chelsea mob came storming around, and I just stood there looking at the sky, admiring the poxy rainy weather. The 50 West Ham in there got run onto the pitch. I was still in there keeping myself to myself. I'm thinking, it's getting to about 2:15 p.m. I'm thinking, forget this, I'll give it another 20 minutes, and if West Ham don't come in, I'm getting out of this place. Out onto the street in that courtyard entrance to the shed were all the Chelsea, and there among them I could see Ted, Bill and Scobie. It was the mob of West Ham that had got off at Sloane Square. Oddly they were singing Chelsea songs. One of them said to me afterwards, "We were singing Chelsea songs walking along the Fulham Broadway." The old Bill turned round and one of them said, "Isn't it a good job that's not West Ham supporters coming in here?" After 2 minutes, West Ham got in. I remember seeing Big Ted on the way up the stairs. At the top I said, "God's sake, Ted, we've just got run out of here." Ted's deadpan reply was, "They won't be running this lot out of here." A couple of hundred West Ham had come up those stairs, and Chelsea had now twigged the enemy were in. A few fists flew, and all you could hear was, "West Ham!" I remember Kerry Tidman, Vic Dark and Chingy all being at the top of the stairs, and it kicked off all around us. We ran underneath all the barriers, kicking the fuck out of all the Chelsea in the way. We stopped at each barrier, mobbed up, then went through to the next one. By the time we got right to the back of the shed, all you could hear was, "We took the Chelsea shed, Stamford Bridge again, clap, clap, clap." Everyone was congratulating themselves, with 400 or 500 West Ham all at the back of Chelsea's end. We couldn't help but give it large, singing, "Come on, get your end back." The Chelsea supporters looked absolutely gutted that they couldn't get their end back. There was a black Chelsea fan who was hyperactive, running around like a headless chicken, trying to have a pop at everyone. I nodded over to him, giving him a wink, as if to say, "Come here, mate, we're with you. We re Chelsea." His arms came up, and he pulled himself into my part of the shed. As he did so, I booted him right underneath the chin with my steel cappers. He went flying, bounced backwards, only to come back all hyper again. A real loon. I thought, this is brilliant, we'll stay in here. But the old Bill had other ideas. They got all their reinforcements in, and started to have us out of the shed. As they took us around the pitch, I remember seeing Tony Barker dangling himself along the crossbar of the goal. I thought Fatty was trying to break the crossbar so we could get the match postponed. West Ham were all over the pitch, kicking up lumps out of it. I thought, lovely, get this postponed and we could do it all over again in a night match. But unfortunately, the game was played. West Ham's keeper Mervyn Day let in two of the softest goals, and we lost 2-1. We were out of the shed and in the north stand when the game ended. Word went about, "Nobody go yet, nobody go yet." Then, 15 minutes after the final whistle, Gardner finally decided to make a move. Swiftly, everybody around me moved out of the north stand exit. A few West Ham supporters that had gone early got run outside. But these were your North Bank boys, idiots who just made a lot of noise. The firm was moving now, all knowing the feeling that you're untouchable. We came out, and all the Chelsea mob were waiting outside the pub opposite the North Stand entrance. But we just casually bowled out. No scarves, no noise, no nothing. We just got tore into them and proceeded to kick the hell out of them. They ran off in the direction of the North End Road. Our mob, of about 300 to 400, just carried on walking past Fulham Broadway Station, where queues of supporters were heading into the underground. Half an hour to 45 minutes after the game, Chelsea's Babs showed, the one-armed, half-caste man with the big reputation. He came out of the streets somewhere with all the fronts in the world. No problem. We've got everybody here. We'll rip his mob apart. Nobody gave a damn about the rumour that the one arm had a meat hook attached. The road hushed with anticipated excitement, both mobs shaped to go. We were all itching, scanning one-arm Babs, thinking the first one in on him could be a new name to talk about when the time came to recite the story of the day. You've got to give one-arm Babs his front because he called it on. "Where's Bill Gardner? I want Gardner." He was seriously fronting us all, taking one step forward, then fucking 8 backwards as Gardner came out of the crowd. The next thing, they'd gone off. The old Bill pushed them away. With old Bill heavy on the scene, we thinned out but still continued down the road. One-arm Babs came back. "Where's Gardner?" Gardner wasn't there, but he recognised Natalie and said, "If Gardner ain't here, you'll do." Nat came out. There was a bit of a standoff. We ran at them, but the old Bill got in the middle, and that was it. The end of a happy day for West Ham. The only way a Chelsea fixture could be interesting was if they showed up at ours to make a point. Going over Chelsea was even bringing all our scarvers out for a day out. A scarver was a run-of-the-mill fan who fancied himself as a hooligan, but was more mouth than action. For a while, Chelsea turned their North Stand into the equivalent of our South Bank by getting a decent firm in there and giving it to all the visiting supporters, except when they played us. They knew the shed wasn't safe, so for a bit of style they took to the seats in the sides. Word went about that they were going to Gate 13. The LCF were on the rise at the time. We did the old 1-2 with the touts. Some of us printed our own tickets, and Swallow and Co. took over Gate 13. The shed had been taken by us more than once. In fact, it had got beyond a joke. The only saving grace left open to Chelsea was for them to come to Upton Park. So, Chelsea came to ours. 3/4 of an hour before kick-off, crowd disturbances broke out in the South Bank, resulting in hundreds of Chelsea fans spilling out onto the pitch. Further fights on the pitch brought in police reinforcements. 57 people were arrested, leading to calls for the club to erect fencing at Upton Park. It was the 80-81 season, a year we all fought tooth and nail to keep our hold on the South Bank, to ensure our intimidation made Upton Park a no-go area for visiting supporters. Mark Woolwich was there on the South Bank for that game. He remembers that season, the club had gotten wise to our South Bank capers and had started to make it all ticket for the away supporters. But we got in there somehow, like we did with Spurs that season. You have just listened to the West Ham point of view and their accounts of taking the shed and the Chelsea mob at the time. Now, let's listen to the Chelsea point of view. Here we go. Chelsea was where it was at. Peter Osgood, Charlie Cook and Alan Hudson were the darlings of London, and the King's Road was the centre of the universe. The season after the FA Cup success, I was to go to that friendly and welcoming home of West Ham, Upton Park, for the first time. I was going with the Pollard's Hill lot, and around 30 of us met up at Beddington Station. Some of us hadn't quite left school yet, but there were a few older boys among us. One went by the name of Shotgun Boyce, his nickname he had awarded to himself on account of the banks he had held up at gunpoint. He told us that a 20-year prison sentence had ensued. We were young, but realised that to have committed these crimes and done the bird, he must have nipped out of his play school in the lunch hour, as he was barely in his 20s. Basically, he was a harmless half-wit, and I suppose that was why he was hanging around with kids half his age. Also with us that day was a fella called Les Kent. Now, Les had hit the big time as his picture had appeared on the front cover of the hugely popular paperback book, Skinhead, written by Richard Allen. This book charted the violent life of a fictional skinhead who went by the name of Joe Hawkins. The book was fairly unbelievable, Pat, but it sold thousands and spawned sequels such as Suede Head and Boot Boys. At one time, dozens of tattered copies were being passed around at my school alone. Les's image on that front cover, lounging against a wall, hands behind his head, in full skinhead regalia, was one familiar to thousands of young people all over Britain. His 15 minutes of fame was sweet. The birds mobbed him like a pop star. He held court at the Croydon Suite every Saturday morning, where they held a disco for the under-16s, often wearing exactly the same gear as in his cover picture, to avoid any confusion. Jealous? Us? And we told the girls that he was our cousin, and that he was not interested in the opposite sex, as he was actually queer, so they were better off going out with us. It never did work. We caught the overground to Wimbledon, where we met up with more Chelsea fans, and we all clambered aboard a District Line train to Upton Park. We were a smart crew, dressed in our Levi cords, navy blue V-neck sleeveless jumpers, and Ben Sherman shirts. There must have been about 50 of us now, and Dave Perks, Keith Perland, and Shotgun Boyce assumed control. "When we get to the station," ordered Shotgun, "let everyone else off the train, and then we walk to the ground together." Fairly obvious, I thought. Perhaps Shotgun had been getting his old lady to read him extracts of Skinhead at bedtime. Nevertheless, everyone listened intently, as these were the eldest, and therefore presumably the best rookers among us. Perks, Perland and Boyce led us off the train at Upton Park station, and things immediately went boss-eyed. West Ham were waiting outside, and steamed straight in without a word said. This was not a problem for us younger ones, who still had the knack of being able to blend in with our surroundings. We managed to walk away from the onslaught, singly or in pairs. West Ham thought either we were them, or that we weren't worth hitting. It wasn't so easy for the older ones, especially poor old Shotgun, who was running for his life down the street, pursued by a baying mob. I couldn't help laughing as he bounded past us, mouth open in terror, looking like a cross between Herman Munster and the lead singer of Mungo Jerry. The rest of us carried on to the ground, but we knew that once we'd walked past the North Bank Terrace, where the West Ham fans filed in, we would be easily identifiable as Chelsea. Trying to act nonchalant, we turned the corner into the road which led to the South Bank. West Ham again, and this time there were no older boys to absorb the assault. I suppose this was the first time I got smacked up at a football match, but I don't remember much about it. I backed myself up against the railings and closed my eyes as the boots and fists came raining in. Every one of us was taking a hiding, and it seemed to go on forever. One solitary copper attempted to break up the fracas. They say there is never a policeman when you need one. Well, I reckon we needed 100 to get us out of that shit. How I wished I was swanning around the Croydon Suite now, on my own patch, with boys and girls of my own age dancing to Spirit in the Sky. I prayed to someone to get me out of this nightmare. I was sorry. God, please, get me out of this, please. Some of us managed to creep along the fence, and as the West Ham fans concentrated on kicking the prostrate boys of our number who had adopted the fetal position on the deck, we legged the last few yards to the gate. I leapt over the turnstile and into the ground. I've been chased out of grounds in my time, but that was the only time I have ever been chased into one. Relief. Only now did I feel the bumps and bruises from the numerous blows to my head and legs, but I was safe for the time being. 10 or so of the Mitcham lot were also inside now. We were shocked and battered, but strangely exhilarated. It was like a rite of passage. I now genuinely felt like one of the mob. We were flattered, in a way, that West Ham had bothered to give us a kicking. Someone spotted Eccles standing alone at the top of the stairs. He was the bloke I had first seen marshalling the gangs at Tottenham. He was 6 foot tall, and possibly 10 years older than us. He came from Fulham, and was unquestionably the recognised leader of the Chelsea gangs at the time. The sight of him lifted us. Dave Perks respectfully approached him. "What's going on?" "Fuck all," replied Eccles, his lips barely moving. His face was redder than usual, and he looked straight ahead as if we weren't there. He obviously wished we weren't. "It's every man for himself. There is more West Ham in this end than Chelsea," he added, speaking out of the side of his mouth like a bad ventriloquist. At that, a huge gap opened up on the terrace, and a menacing mob ducked under the crushed barriers and headed towards us. The Chelsea behind us turned and fled. We could hear them. I looked to my side and saw the black Harrington jacket of Eccles disappearing down the stairs with the rest of them. We were back in the front line, us lot from Mitcham, and for some reason we did not run. The West Ham firm were facing us. They were grown men, not boys, and they were smiling and laughing at us. "Have a look, it's the fucking Chelsea double-deckers," mocked one, referring to a TV programme about a gang of kids that was showing at the time. Another eased himself under the last remaining crush barrier between them and us and lunged at me. Fortunately, he stumbled forwards, and as he put his hands out to break his fall, Tony Aldworth volleyed him full in the face with his boot. This geezer was about 30 years of age and 15 stone, and already his eye was swelling up. West Ham paused. This wasn't in the plan, and neither was Teddy Adams, a big gypsy boy from Mitcham, encouraged by the West Ham hesitation, stepping forward into the no-man's land that had opened up and shouting, "Come on then, mush, we'll have some." The great thing about Mitcham boys was that many had gypsy blood in them, and they feared no one, especially if they detected any lack of bottle in their opponents. In the meantime, the police had arrived and placed a line of their finest between us and them. Heartened by the single strike and our stand, Chelsea fans gathered behind us and swelled our numbers. The ironic thing was that it was us kids on the front line who were now taking the piss out of West Ham, and in particular Fatty, who was now sporting a shiner. We were on a high. Basically, it had been a gang of school kids taking on West Ham's beer monsters, and not doing too bad. The walk back to the tube after the game was much safer, as the police seemed more effective in keeping the locals away from us. We could see and hear older Chelsea fans nudging one another and saying, "They're the ones that fronted up West Ham." Our little chests puffed out, and our nervous walks transformed into a swagger. Talking to some older boys on the way home, we learned that the previous season a Chelsea firm from Stockwell had got in West Ham's North Bank, steamed straight in, and cleared the end. When the East Londoners realised that there was only about 100 Chelsea, they regrouped and ran them back out. Nevertheless, the Hammers had been humiliated, and today's venom had all been about revenge. Someone on the train claimed that Eccles had done a bunk just after half-time. I got to know him well in the years to come, and he was no coward. He was a great architect of rucks, the best organiser, and a maestro of taking ends. But for some reason he had no enthusiasm for mixing it with West Ham. It was like their mob had some strange hold over him. Perhaps it was because they had bigger and older chaps, or maybe he believed the reputation that went before them. Looking back on it now, it must have been hard for him. He was very well known, and I don't think he enjoyed having that higher profile in London. You never knew who you were going to bump into when going about your normal business during the week. I went back to Upton Park many times over the next 20 years, and the lesson I learnt from that first time was that you got to give it to them, or they will eat you alive. Back on Wimbledon Station, who was waiting for us on the platform but Shotgun Boyce. He stood there by the snack bar, stuffing a whole bag of crisps into his mouth as fast as he could to avoid having to offer any around. As we walked towards him, someone rechristened him Starting Gun Boyce, because at the first sign of trouble he had been off like a shot. Dave Perks switched his allegiance to West Ham a short time later. He claimed that Chelsea had mistaken him for a hammer outside Stamford Bridge one afternoon and kicked shit out of him, so he decided to defect. I doubt it. I think he went because he was attracted by the tougher image that West Ham enjoyed in those days. Starting Gun Boyce drifted into oblivion, never appearing at football or the Croydon Suite again. One day, about 15 years later, I spotted a man and wife jogging team running towards me on the common. They wore identical purple shell suits, a right couple of donuts. As they passed me, the gaping mouth and the long legs stirred, a distant memory. As the seasons passed, many of those Mitcham boys stopped going to football, met a bird, got nicked, lost interest, a variety of reasons. Me, I kept on going. I left school and got a job with Dad, and rarely saw the lads from Pollard's Hill. All my money went on football, records and clothes. Reggae was the big thing, and in the early skinhead days, anything on the Trojan record label was on the shopping list. I recall buying Return of the Yango by the Upsetters and The Liquidator, the latter becoming a theme tune down at the bridge. The Tighten Up albums were a must for all us young skins, and tracks like Wreck a Buddy with the line, "And if he's ugly, I don't mind he's got a dick, and I want to grind," were about the closest we got to sex. My wages also afforded me the opportunity to expand my limited wardrobe. Jungle greens were meant to ride quite high up the leg, but after 3 years of growing they were almost like shorts on me. I invested in a pair of two-tone tonic suits, one red and blue and the other green and blue. Dad helped me get started as usual, and bought me a blue Crombie overcoat from a Jewish tailor in Petticoat Lane for 14 shillings. With my steel comb nestling in the top pocket against a red silk handkerchief and liberal splashes of brute aftershave, I thought I was the bollocks. Another accessory for milder weather was the Harrington jacket. These were wind cheetah jackets with a turned-up collar and a silky check lining. Running across the middle of the back was a wavy line. They were popularised by Ryan O'Neill, who played a character named Rodney Harrington in the American TV soap Peyton Place. Finally, perched on the head was a trilby-type hat, known either as a blue beet hat or a pork pie hat. This headwear was particularly favoured by West Indian and African skinheads. In the 60s and early 70s, black kids and white kids played together, danced together, drank together, and went to football together. We liked the same music, clothes and clubs. There was no animosity whatsoever. In fact, black boys carried off the whole skinhead thing with style. Groups of us skinheads walked around Brixton Market, and we wouldn't attract a second glance. We were young and rough, but we were all on the same side. It wasn't until the mid to late 70s that these values changed, with the emergence of the far right-wing groups that began to attract a following at football. Skinheads are indelibly associated with racism, but in my mind history has been rewritten here. By the time race hate had emerged at football grounds, the original skinheads were a thing of the past. I must hold my hands up to one anomaly though. Skinheads did go in for a spot of Asian bashing, as it was called. It didn't last for long, and it was carried out by both blacks and whites, as they victimised the first refugees from Idi Amin's Uganda. Pakistanis were deemed fair game, as were homosexuals. Queer bashing was another short-lived but violent craze, latched onto by the press after a homosexual was kicked to death by a gang of skins on Wimbledon Common. I had not been at work long when my dad sadly died. I was 16. It devastated me. I put a brave face on it and tried to be strong for Mum's sake, but inside I was aching and bitter. I treasure his memory, the trips to football, boxing and wrestling, the rattle he made me, the money he pressed into my palm even when Mum had said no, the laughs we had. Only now do I appreciate how hard he worked for us and how he tried to make our lives happy and fulfilled. He was a good man, a real gent, and the best dad I could ever have wished for. God bless him. We will never forget. If I can be half the father to my kids that he was to me, then they will have been well served. With hindsight, his death affected me greatly. After that West Ham game, when I thought I was Jack the Lad, if Dad had said, "Look, Martin, I know what's happening at these football matches. I don't want you to get involved with any of this," I'd have said, "Okay, Dad," and would have kept my promise.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you subscribe, you will be notified when we release a new video. It could be your firm we make a video about next, so don't miss out and hit the subscribe button. You can find me on Facebook or email me if you have a good story to tell. See you next time.